You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans! Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and this show just got turned on its head. Oh my goodness! I was fully expecting to just break down a moderate NHL signing and Seton Hall Butler, along with Kyrie and the Hall of Fame inductees that I missed. But now there's an NBA trade with Jeff Teague going back to the Hawks and Carlos Beltran stepping down. There's so much to get to. I'm gonna start with the Hall of Fame, then I'll do Kyrie, and then Jeff Teague, and then Beltran. I'll go chronologically, I guess. I have no idea. My head is spinning! This is unreal! Oh, man alive! I love this show. I really, really love this show. Alright. On to the Pro Football Hall of Fame now. This actually happened yesterday morning, but I just completely missed it. Like, there is no excuse for it. I just missed it. In fact, the way that I found out about it was the Pro Football Hall of Fame on Twitter tweeted an ICYMI about George Young. And it said that he was inducted into the Hall of Fame, so it's like, okay, he was the third guy inducted. And then I looked, and it's like, oh wow, they inducted a bunch of other people. So, regardless, I'm going to get into it now, alphabetically by last name, and I'll start with Harold Carmichael. There is no better wide receiver in Eagles history than Carmichael. This guy is in their Hall of Fame and was named to their 75th anniversary team. He's also their leader in receiving yards. He is without question the best wide receiver, best pass catcher in Eagles history. When you look at him for Hall of Fame, it gets a little dicey. He only has really 3 great years, 73, 78, and 81. And he didn't even make the Pro Bowl in 81. He didn't make All-Pro. He didn't do anything like that. But the thing that I like about Carmichael is where he ranks in terms of receiving touchdowns. He is tied for 28th all-time in receiving touchdowns with 79. He's tied with Gronk and Charlie Taylor. And there aren't too many players that are out of the Hall of Fame that are ahead of him. He's also ahead of some Hall of Famers there. Fred Biletnikoff, James Lofton, Bob Hayes, Raymond Berry, Art Monk. So that's his case for Hall of Fame. The fact that he caught so many touchdowns. I'll give Carmichael my seal of approval. He's a little borderline-ish, but he's on the right side of being borderline. He's also a former New York Jet, which is a little interesting anecdote there. He finished his career with the Dallas Cowboys, but before he got to the Cowboys, he actually spent that offseason, the 84 offseason, with the Jets. He was then cut after the preseason. The Cowboys then scooped him up, and he was really a shell of his former self. He didn't make any sort of impact at all for him, but it's just an interesting anecdote there. The next guy who was inducted was Jim Covert, otherwise known as Dan Marino's roommate when they were both at the University of Pittsburgh. Covert had a good career. He played on a good offensive line. It wasn't a great offensive line by any stretch. If you watch those games, it's really Walter Payton doing a lot of the work there. And sure, he helped Jim McMahon a lot. I'm not saying he didn't. But that offensive line isn't going to be mistaken for the Hogs line anytime soon. He was a good player. He wasn't a great player. He was never a great player. 2-time Pro Bowler? 2-time All-Pro? He may not have even been the best offensive lineman on that line. You can make an argument that it was Jay Hilgenberg. Maybe Keith Van Horn, Tom Thayer, Mark Bortz. They had a good offensive line. I'm not saying Covert was the weak link. Look, Covert played left tackle, an insanely important position, especially for the righty McMahon. He had a good career, but he's not a Hall of Famer. Look, he had a good career. He didn't have a great career. The thing that you like about Covert for his Hall of Fame candidacy is that he owned Lawrence Taylor. Lawrence Taylor looked like minced meat whenever he went up against Covert. But we're putting a guy in the Hall of Fame just because he owned one player? I understand that it's probably the greatest defensive player ever, and he does get points for that. But if you look at his total body of work, he's not a Hall of Famer! That's what we look at for the Hall of Fame. We look at total bodies of work. This guy could make the Hall of Very Good, which is actually a real thing, by the PFHOF, but not the Pro Football Hall of Fame. This guy's not a Hall of Famer. This guy doesn't deserve to be mentioned in the same breath as Anthony Munoz, Big Bob Brown, Mel Hine, guys like that. Interesting anecdote about Covert, though. He was interviewed by the Steelers when he was draft eligible, and the Steelers asked him if Dan Marino ever used drugs. That was a rumor that was going around, that Marino was a druggie at the University of Pittsburgh. But Covert flat out denied it. He said no, and Marino was not a druggie. I don't know where that rumor started from, but no, he was clean as clean can be. Moving over now to Bobby Dillon, otherwise known as the greatest defensive back of the 1950s. I don't know what took Bobby Dillon so long to get into the Hall of Fame. Maybe him dying in August had something to do with it. People finally re-examined his candidacy. But this guy should have been in a long time ago. He played 8 seasons, made All-Pro in 4 of them, 4-time Pro Bowler, is the Packers' all-time interceptions leader with 52. And here's the kicker, he was blind in one eye. He was like Wesley Walker. He did all of that with just one working eye. If that doesn't make you a Hall of Famer, I don't know what does. When it comes to examining the Hall of Fame candidacies for non-skill position players, we can't look at leaderboards. We have to look at dominance. We have to look at peak years. And there was no one more dominant in the 1950s when we look at defensive backs than Bobby Dillon. Moving over to another defensive back, Cliff Harris. I've met Cliff Harris. He was a very nice guy to me. Met him in an autograph signing, and he signed a Dallas Cowboys helmet that I have. Really, really nice guy. And a very, very deserving Hall of Famer. This guy was one of the best, if not the best, safety of the 1970s. 2-time Super Bowl winner, 6-time Pro Bowler, 4-time first-team All-Pro. He made the All-Decade team in the 70s. His peak years were amazing. And he did all of this only playing in the 70s. That's it. He only played 10 seasons. He retired at the age of 31. He got out early. He wanted to work on his oil business. But in that time, he accomplished more than a bunch of players who played many more seasons than him. Cliff Harris is a well-deserving Hall of Famer. The next guy up is Winston Hill, otherwise known as the best offensive lineman in AFL history. It's not even close. If you've watched any of those old Jets games in the AFL with Namath, Maynard, Snell, and Boozer, you can see how dominant Hill is clearing holes for people. He started 174 consecutive games. And let me tell you, he was great in almost every single one of them. I can't remember a game where he got thrashed, embarrassed mercilessly. He was always at the top of his game. And when he went over to the NFL, his dominance didn't stop. He made 4 Pro Bowls. The only bad thing about Hill, and I am saying this as a Jets fan, the only bad thing is he ended his career, just like Namath, with the LA Rams. So, we can't say that he's the best player in Jets franchise history to play his whole career with the Jets. That honor goes to Larry Grantham. But regardless, despite that black mark, Winston Hill is a very, very deserving Hall of Famer. It's been a very noticeable snub for a long time, and I'm very happy that the Pro Football Hall of Fame finally got it right. Moving on now to Alex Karras, otherwise known as the father in Webster, Mongo in Blazing Saddles. Hate that movie. It's funny if you say to any old movie fans or TV fans, they'll say, why did Alex Karras get inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame? What? Wait a minute, I didn't know that he played it in the NFL. Well, yeah, he had a very good NFL career, and then he transitioned over to Hollywood, where he had another very good career. Karras is really tough. I understand that he was insanely dominant in the 60s. 4-time Pro Bowler, 3-time first-team All-Pro, 6-time second-team All-Pro, and he made the All-Decade team. I get all that. But he missed a whole season for gambling, along with Paul Hornung, and he wasn't as dominant as Hornung. That does hurt his candidacy. It's very difficult that you can miss a whole season in the prime of your career and then come back to playing at a Hall of Fame level. And the main thing is, Karras played for a bunch of lousy Detroit Lions teams. He only made the playoffs once. He's borderline. I understand why people are putting him in, because he had a distinguished Hollywood career, and he did bounce back from being suspended. He played well. I mean, it cuts both ways. There are people who will punish him for being suspended for gambling, and there are people who will applaud him for coming back and at a high level. I get that. It's really, really tough for me to say whether Karras is a Hall of Famer or not definitively. He's really borderline to me. If I had to say, I would say no. I just don't think he had enough postseason success, and the year off really, really hurts him in my eyes. Moving over now to Steve Sabol, the first non-player that I'm going over now. It's about time that Sabol got in. His father's been in for a while. The two of them were obviously the driving forces behind NFL films for a very, very long time. We all know how instrumental NFL films was to providing the general public with profiles of their favorite players and players that they didn't know about but should have. There is no league that has done a better job of getting their players' faces out there in that respect than the NFL. Yes, they're hidden by helmets. They're not as visible as MLB players, NBA players, even NHL players, except goalies. But what NFL films did was it got you inside the player's mind. It got you in the locker room. You saw their faces. You were able to recognize them as they were walking down the street. And they really helped push the NFL into a new era. NFL Films was one of the most important tools that the league had for furthering its popularity. Steve Sabol was a big part of it. His father's already in the Hall of Fame. It's about time they put Steve in. Moving over now to Donnie Shell. I've met Donnie Shell also. Donnie Shell was another insanely nice guy. Met him in a Pittsburgh mall. I flew there, actually, from New York, just to meet him and Andy Russell. And let me tell you, I don't regret it. Really, really nice guys. Donnie Shell won 4 Super Bowls. He was an integral part of the Steel Curtain. We all think that it was just the defensive line that could be considered the Steel Curtain. No, you can put Donnie Shell there also. And guys like Jack Ham, Jack Lambert, and Mel Blount were integral parts of one of the best defenses in NFL history. It's about time that Donnie Shell got in. You really gotta wonder what took so long for some of these people, man. Moving on now to Duke Slater. There really isn't much I can say about him. I'd be lying to you if I said that I knew anything about him other than he's the first African-American offensive lineman in NFL history. By all accounts, he was a great football player in his own right, regardless of the pioneering status he had. 5-time first-team All-Pro, 2-time second-team All-Pro. There's no question that he should be in the Hall of Fame. I wish that I could tell you more about him, but I really can't. I'll tell you what, I'll break out my DeLorean. I'll go back in time, and I'll watch them for you. Moving on now to Mac Speedy. Now, firstly, let me just say that we need more names like that in sports. Mac Speedy. There's no better name in this class than that. I know I said that peak years for non-skill players are important, but when you look at a guy like Speedy before the merger, they're equally important. That's really the only way that you can accurately measure how dominant these guys were. You can't compare guys like Don Hutson and Raymond Berry to today's wide receivers. It's a completely different game. And Speedy has a bunch of bold type on the back of his football card. He actually left the NFL in the prime of his career, or just exiting the prime of his career, to go to the CFL, or what was then known as the Western Interprovincial Football Union. Speedy was making $11,000 for the Browns. The Saskatchewan Roughriders doubled it. Can you imagine a CFL team doing that now? Saying to a guy like Michael Thomas, yeah, we're going to double your salary. It's really amazing, and Speedy took it. Speedy went to the WIFU. And he had a decent career there. Not as good as what he had in the NFL. He got hurt, and that's where he ended his career. But when you look at his NFL career, he was an insanely dominant end. That's what they called wide receivers then. Ends. He definitely deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. Moving over now to Ed Sprinkle. This guy was feared in his day. George Halas called him the greatest pass rusher he's ever seen. He was a jack of all trades. He played offensive guard, defensive end, tight end. He even started a game at quarterback as a goof. There were some people that accused him of dirty play. Truthfully, I haven't seen enough of him to really give an opinion on that. It definitely hurt his candidacy for a long time. He was actually defensive coordinator of the Jets when they were in the AFL for a year. But when you look at his Hall of Fame candidacy, I just don't think it's there. 4-time Pro Bowler, 2-time first-team All-Pro, 3-time second-team All-Pro. Look, he had a really good career. The peak years, the dominance really isn't there for me. He does have a reputation as a dirty player. Again, I'm just going off what I've heard. I can't necessarily say that I endorse him for Hall of Fame. But I definitely wouldn't say that to his face. Moving on now to a couple contributors. And I'll start with Paul Tagliabue. We don't remember Tagliabue as fondly as we should. Especially when you look at the knucklehead that's currently in charge of the league. But that's an issue for another day. Tagliabue took over for a great commissioner in Pete Rozelle. Probably the best commissioner in NFL history. But Tagliabue carved out a niche for himself. He expanded the league by 4 teams. The Panthers, Jaguars, the Cleveland Browns when they came back after moving to Baltimore, and the Houston Texans. And none of those teams have struggled to stay afloat. We can argue about their football decisions, but from a business standpoint, they've never been in financial peril. He made a mistake by pushing the NFL in Europe. NFL Europe was a thing. I understand that it produced Kurt Warner, but it was really a waste of time. Didn't really amount to much. Cost a lot of money. I don't mind a few London games here and there, but a whole league over there I think is way, way, way too much. The great thing about Tagliabue, and this is why he is very deserving of being in the Hall of Fame, is the political stance that he took. He canceled a whole week of games after 9/11. He knew that that wasn't the appropriate time to have a distraction when it comes to sports. He knew that the nation needed to grieve and security resources could be better spent elsewhere. When Arizona refused to establish a state holiday for Martin Luther King, Tagliabue moved the Super Bowl. Can you imagine moving the Super Bowl? He convinced Tom Benson not to move the Saints to San Antonio after Hurricane Katrina. He helped the city rebuild its football team, which is a huge part of the identity of that city. This guy was a great commissioner. He just happened to come after the greatest of all time in Rozelle. But when we look at him in the prism of Goodell, we can see how great Tagliabue really was. A very, very well-deserving Hall of Famer. The last guy is George Young. I don't know what's taken the Hall of Fame so long to induct George Young. This guy took over the Giants right after the miracle of the Meadowlands, and that was just a microcosm of how terrible they were. They had fallen off a cliff. When Young got there, they hadn't made the playoffs in 15 years. Andy Robustelli had run that organization into the ground. Now, he was a great player, but when it came to actually running a team, Robustelli was no good. After the miracle at the Meadowlands, Pete Rozelle called Tim Mara and strongly implored him to get a new guy in there, and he personally recommended George Young. And Young took over, and almost overnight really put that team back on track. He is one of the best drafters in NFL history. I understand that towards the end he faltered, but early on he drafted guys like Phil Simms, Lawrence Taylor, Joe Morris, and Carl Banks. The anchors of those Super Bowl runs. He hired Ray Perkins as his first head coach, and Ray Perkins was the architect of Bill Parcells' offense. Now, unfortunately, during the end of Young's tenure, it really didn't go that well. His big issue was free agency. He didn't know how to handle it. He made a bunch of bad decisions. He hired Ray Handley to replace Parcells. Ray Handley was a terrible coach. He couldn't navigate the salary cap. But that shouldn't take away from what was an excellent career. A career that should have been honored in Canton a long time ago. And towards the end of his career, he also found guys like Michael Strahan, Amani Toomer, and Tiki Barber. It's about damn time that George Young got inducted into the Hall of Fame. Moving on now to Kyrie Irving's comments. I'm not gonna read them. We all know what he said by now. Here's what I'll say about it. He's right! I mean, seriously! Have you been watching the Nets? Because I have. They're playing like garbage. Look, I understand that you don't necessarily want a player singling out guys for trade. You look at the guys that Kyrie mentioned as core pieces, and he left out some notable names: Jared Allen, Taurean Prince, and Joe Harris. But, you know what? He's not wrong. They need help. This is a team that shouldn't be in the playoffs. I understand that they're going to make the playoffs just because the East is so awful, but they're going to get embarrassed. Giannis is going to go for 30 every night against them. Look, on Monday I said, wait until next year and everything will be fine. But the way that this core is shaken out, realize something. This is going to be a similar team next year. The only difference is Kevin Durant. And I understand that that's a huge difference. But it's still only one player. The Nets do need help. Jared Allen has had a major regression this year. Or at the very least, hasn't taken the leap that we all thought he would. And their bench is nothing special either. Guys like Wilson Chandler, Zanin Musa, Rodion Kurucs, they're all replaceable. Kyrie's not wrong. Look, this isn't a good look for Kyrie. He certainly has a reputation for being a locker room cancer, and this isn't going to help things. I'm sure that guys like Allen, Prince, and Harris want to kill him now. But the Nets do need help. If they actually want to be sort of kind of competitive this year, and at the very least make the playoffs interesting, I don't see them getting past the first round, regardless of who they face, the Bucks, the Celtics, the Heat, whoever. They do need to do something. What's their big move going to be? Signing Luwawu Cabarro to a standard contract? Let me tell you something. I don't like him. I don't think he's that good. It may be time for Marks to seize an opportunity here and make a big splash. I don't know how it could be done. Maybe a guy like Bradley Beal or Kevin Love. Not Andre Drummond, though. I mean, maybe Drummond. He's better than Jared Allen. I understand the contract is a lot, but he's better than Jared Allen. Look, Joe Tsai has said that he's okay with paying the luxury tax in order to build a championship contender. It may be time to really explore some blockbuster trades. I don't know how it can be done. All I know is Kyrie was right. The Nets do need help. There was a better way to go about this. Go to Kenny Atkinson and Sean Marks and say, this is what I think we need to do to be better. I mean, Kyrie has earned that right. He is a fantastic player, and he should have input on the roster. But don't do it publicly like this. That's the thing. That's the only issue with this. He just did it publicly. And it's going to be very interesting to see how the players like Allen, Prince, and Harris respond. This does have the potential to blow up. There's no question about that. But I don't think that Atkinson is gonna let it get to that point. He does need to try different things, though, with the rotation. Whether it's benching Allen or getting Kurucs or Musa more involved, whatever. I don't know. I'm just spitballing. Maybe putting Dinwiddie back on the bench and starting Temple. I don't know, but the Nets do need to do something. Because right now they are in a major, major tailspin. Moving on now to the Jeff Teague trade. The Hawks get the edge here. Jeff Teague is a much better backup for Trae Young than Brandon Goodwin and Evan Turner put together. I understand that Teague isn't having a great year this year. He's been coming off the bench for Shabazz Napier, but he's still contributing. He's averaging 13 points a game, 2.5 rebounds, 6 assists. He's a really good backup for the Hawks. Like, they want to be respectable. They don't want to be the worst team in the league. That's what this trade shows me. They're prepared to get better. They're tired of being bad. They want to be good. They realize that this core that they have of Trae Young, Kevin Huerter, Cam Reddish, and DeAndre Hunter, they're not ready to win a championship yet by any stretch, but they all certainly shouldn't be on the worst team in the NBA. I mean, my God, the Hawks are dreadful this year. I admire them for making a concerted effort to get better. Treveon Graham will help their wing defense dramatically. Saw him a lot with the Nets last year. He wasn't that great. I didn't think he should have been starting, but if he's coming off the bench in a 3-and-D role, I can accept that. And Alan Crabb is just past his prime. I'd be stunned if he got another contract next year. He's on the last year of that big offer sheet that he signed with the Nets and the Trailblazers matched. He's one of the most overpaid players in the NBA. The Hawks easily, and I mean easily, win this trade. Alright, now it's time for the moment you've all been waiting for. Carlos Beltran being fired. And that's what he was here. Alright, I don't want to hear this mutually agreed to part ways nonsense. Alright, he was canned. The Mets didn't want him around anymore. They didn't want the distraction. Beltran would have put up with it because now he comes off terribly here. I mean, there are a bunch of angles to hit here. I'll start with Beltran. This guy was one of the most respected players in baseball. And he transitioned over to a front office role, was very well respected there, was a finalist for the Yankees job before it went to Boone. There were some people in that organization pushing for the Yankees to hire Beltran. Then he goes to the Mets, a team that he played for, but the fans never really loved him. They always gave him a hard time. They never really accepted him as one of their own. Certainly, the call third strike didn't help. But he was never beloved by Mets fans, but Van Wagenen hired him, and there was really nothing that Mets fans could do about it. They could hate the hire all they wanted, but you know what? They had to support him. I didn't like the Aaron Boone hire, but you know what? I have to support him. And I was glad to cast my imaginary ballot for Manager of the Year last year for him. But now, his reputation is shot. This guy played in the height of the steroid era, and was never accused of anything. He was a saint. He was an altar boy. And then he goes to the Astros and participates in their sign stealing. Now, he was not a ringleader. I want to make that clear here. Manfred was really disingenuous here, and he really put the Mets in a bad spot. This was a really, really terrible thing for Manfred to do, and a bunch of people in the media seized on it. They didn't read the report. All Carlos Beltran is part of a group of players that wanted the sign stealing to get better. Read the report! I feel like the president. Read the report! If you're gonna punish Beltran, which is fine, you can punish Beltran. But you have to punish everyone else that was part of it. Maybe there were some Astros that honestly didn't go along with it, that just ignored it, that didn't pay attention to the banging. Those guys are fine. I have no issues with them. But the guys who didn't, the guys who made a concerted effort to improve it and use it, those guys should be punished now. Why are you singling out Beltran? Look, I'm not a Beltran fan by any stretch. I didn't like that hire. But he deserves better than this. Why was he specifically mentioned? Just because he's now a manager? If he's part of a group of players, name everyone in the group. The fact that he's now managing the Mets is irrelevant. It shouldn't matter. This has nothing to do with the Mets. It's just about the Astros. And now the Mets come off looking bad. Brody looks like an idiot. The Wilpons look like an idiot. Everyone in that organization from the top down has been made to look like fools. And look, I'm a Yankees fan. I hope the Mets go 0-162 along with the Red Sox. But I'm a baseball fan. And my baseball fan sense is telling me that this is wrong. There's no reason to single out Beltran. None. Let's say, just hypothetically, 30 years from now, Alex Bregman is named manager of the Astros. Just hypothetically. Are we going to hear that Bregman was one of those players along with Beltran that wanted to improve the sign stealing? What happens then? Are the Astros going to fire Bregman? Correa, Altuve, Marisnik, Rennick, McCann, whoever? And now Van Wagenen comes off like an idiot. Now, I'm not a Brody fan. I think that this is a make-or-break year for him. Even before all this happened, I thought this was a make-or-break year for him. All his big moves last year failed. And he's put the Mets in a really tough spot for this year. They have to contend this year, or they have a bunch of players that are free agents. And they can't bring them all back. But Brody looks like an idiot here. How does Brody survive this? This was his guy. This was who Van Wagenen wanted. And now he's gone before he even managed the game. He did his best Belichick impression. And the Wilpons don't get off scot-free either. They put their trust in someone who lied to them and a GM who couldn't discern when he was being lied to. Look, I believe that Beltran tried to minimize his role in the sign stealing. That's what I believe. And I'd love if Brody came up in a press conference and was asked the question, what did Beltran tell you? If Van Wagenen was out and out lied to, if Beltran sweared on a Bible that he had nothing to do with it, okay, fine. You know, Beltran is a man of integrity, and that does mean something. Or at least he was a man of integrity. Can't say that anymore. How does this hurt his Hall of Fame status? How does this affect Bregman, Correa, Altuve's Hall of Fame status? It's a conversation for another day. The Mets come off here looking like morons. That they didn't do their due diligence. And at the end of the day, that's on the GM. I don't know how they recover from this. Look, it's easier for the Astros because they have really good players. And the Red Sox weren't really expected to be that good this year. They've made it clear that their focus is getting under the luxury tax. They didn't really make a concerted effort to get better. They may contend for a wild card spot, but I don't see them being a great team this year. They'll be over 500, but I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. But the Mets were a team that was looking to make that jump. from irrelevancy to a playoff team. Now, forget it. It's done. They're not making the playoffs after this. They're a ship without a captain now. I don't care who they get to replace Beltran. Hensley Mullins, Tony DeFrancesco, Luis Rojas, Phil Regan, whoever. It doesn't matter. They're done. It's over. There's no coming back from this if you're the Mets. They don't have the players capable of overcoming this. They have a couple great players in Alonso and McNeil. That's it. And DeGrom. 3 players out of 25. I feel sorry for you, Mets fans. You did not deserve this. I really thought that Beltran was going to escape this. There was a very easy out for him. All he had to do was say, I was part of a group of players. And just own up to it. I have no idea what was said in the interview. Maybe Van Wagenen was just lied to. Or maybe Beltran admitted what he did but minimized it. And didn't think it would blow up like this. But now, the reputation of one of the most respected men in all of baseball has been shot. He pulled a Lance Armstrong. Brodie Van Wagenen is now more under the microscope than he was, and that's saying something. And this is another nail in the Wilpons' coffin, in Mets fans' eyes. I didn't think there could be any more nails. Steve Cohen can't come soon enough. But even then, there's no guarantee Cohen's going to be a great owner. Just because he has a lot of money doesn't mean he's going to be a great owner. He'll look to make a splash. That's what all new owners do. And then we'll see. We'll see if he's a Steinbrenner, or we'll see if he's a David Glass. I feel for you, Mets fans. You guys did not deserve this. There's no reason that Beltran should have lost his job here. The Mets are cowardly. The Mets are inept. Everyone involved in this should be ashamed of themselves. This is a black mark on a lot of people. Tomorrow, I'm going to be previewing the AFC and NFC title games, along with any other big news that breaks. I have no idea what the future holds. I didn't see this coming. I didn't see the Teague trade coming. My head is still spinning. Oh my goodness gracious. Until tomorrow, I am Jacob Valk saying, have you ever seen a mechanic work on a car without tools? It's pretty much the Mets right now.